Hello everyone, welcome back again. In this video, I want to quickly do a recap of the lecture we had on data cleaning and formatting in Excel. Now, in that lecture, I emphasized that the first task of a data analyst may be to collect data, but not in all instances. At times, organizations, they already have their data collection softwares or platform, but yet they need someone to analyze the data for them. So such organizations can give us they can export their data into Excel formats, and the data will be given to us for data analysis. But before we can work on such data, we must clean the data. I also emphasize on the fact that before we clean a data, we must first understand the data. Understanding the data involves understanding different variables that were used to explain the data. For instance, you need to know the meaning of different abbreviations of different column headers that you have in your data. Let me use this data set as a case study. This data set is called Boston data set. It was used to collect different variables of individuals living in Boston. Take a look at the column 1. The column 1 header is cream. Column B header, I have ZL, Hindus, Chase, Norse, RM. If I don't understand the meaning of all these abbreviations, there is no way I can analyze the data. Imagine, column A1, cell A1, whose header is crime, means crime rate in that region. Can you imagine? Crime means crime rate. So with that, I've gained an understanding that the data I have in column A is relating to the crime rate in that region. Take a look at column E. The column header is NOS. So how will I understand the meaning of that? NOS means nitric oxide concentration in that region. So with that, I've gained more understanding of my data. So understanding our data is very, very important. In fact, it's an important step we need to do before we clean our data. So after understanding our data, the next step we need to do will be to clean our data. It is after we've cleaned our data that we can begin to analyze and visualize our data. Now, we want to use Excel to clean our data. Data cleaning involves what? Data cleaning is a critical process in data analysis that involves identifying and correcting errors, inconsistencies, and inaccuracies in a data set to improve its quality and reliability. Data cleaning is a critical process in data analysis that involves what? Identifying and correcting errors. Errors that you've not identified, there is no way you can correct it. You can only correct an error after it has been identified. So the first step towards cleaning data is to identify those data. How to identify those data will be explained in this video. You identify the data and then correct the errors you've identified. Data cleaning also involves what? Removing inconsistencies and inaccuracies in our data sets. And what's the essence of doing all these things is to what? Improve the quality and reliability of our data sets. So as a data analyst, data cleaning is one of the initial and essential steps before conducting any meaningful analysis. Now, what are the steps involved? What are the activities involved in data cleaning? It involves what? Spell checking. It involves correcting misspelled values. Data cleaning involves removal of empty rows, and it also involves removal of duplicated rows of data. I want to advise us that anytime we want to clean our data, we should follow these steps, these sequential steps. First, spell check. Then correct misspelled values. After then, you can now proceed to remove your empty rows. And after then, you can now remove duplicated rows of data. When I get to the practical section, you see, you agree with me the reason why we need to conform our data cleaning activities by following this step. First, check the grammatical errors in your data. After you've checked the grammatical errors in your data, in the process of checking the grammatical errors in your data, you can identify some grammatical errors perhaps that were identified in the names of individual that you don't agree to, that you need to correct as a misspelled value. So if you want to clean our data in Excel, there are two ways of doing that. Number one, you can use inbuilt Power Query editor to clean our data. In addition to the inbuilt Excel Power Query editor, you can still use certain inbuilt Excel functions to clean our data. Excel Power Query editor is only available in data that Excel Power Query editor is only available in Microsoft 2016 or Microsoft 2010 or 2016 upward. So if you are using an older version of Microsoft Excel, you may not have this Excel Power Query editor. Now let me illustrate how you can use Excel Power Query editor. Now, Power Query is a business intelligence tool offered by Microsoft Excel that allows you to import data from any sources. In our previous interaction, I've laid emphasis, I've established the fact that our data can be in different sources. Data can be collected from different sources. It could be a database, it could be in CSV format, it could be in text format, it could be from a database, it could be in XML format, it could be from a web application. So our data can be in different sources. But Power Query is a business intelligence tool that allows you to import your data from any sources. It doesn't just allow you to import your data from any sources, but it also allows you to carry out a cleaning exercise on the data before you finally import them into your Microsoft Excel. It also allows you to transform the data and reshape it according to your needs. So I said it can be found in Excel 2010 upward, and if it's not in your Excel, you can always download it as add-on. Now, how do you activate Power Query Editor? There are three different ways of activating Power Query Editor. Method one, if you have already opened your data and the Power Query Editor was not automatically launched, you can go to the data menu, you locate Get and Transform Group, you click from Table Command, then you press OK. If a window pops up, then the Power Query Editor will pop up. Now let me illustrate that. Now this is my data set. I want to use Power Query Editor to clean this. But Power Query Editor does not, in this instance, I want to activate the Power Query Editor. So how will I do that? I can go to Data. Then I will go to Get and Transform Group. Then I will click from Table. Immediately I click from Table, now take a look at this. I've identified an error in the sense that I only activated cells outside my data set. So I will cancel this and make sure that at least a cell in my data set is activated. So I'll go back to New Query. I'll go back to From Table. It has highlighted all my data sets. Now, take a look at this. You can see that it has not highlighted all the data sets. It has only identified data set from cell B1 to cell G36. And that's because there is an empty row after the data set. There is an empty row after the data set. Those are the inconsistencies or inaccuracies that empty rows can introduce into a data set. Now I will have to cancel this because all my data sets must be activated. So if I have empty rows in my data set, the best thing I can do will now be to manually. If I press Ctrl A, I'll discover that it will see, you can see, Ctrl A has not highlighted all the data sets. It's only highlighted data set from cell B38 to cell G86. So that means I need to manually highlight all the data sets. Okay, I'm highlighting all the data sets manually. So I've highlighted all the data sets. Then I'll press From Table. So you can now see it's telling me that my data set ranges from cell B1 to cell G699. B1 to cell G699. Now I want to confirm that. So all my data sets has been captured. Then I'll click OK. before clicking OK, take a look at this. My table has headers. Does my table has headers? Yes, my table has headers. I'll click OK. So Power Query has automatically pop up. This is the first way of activating my Power Query. Okay, one of the things I can do with my Power Query. Number one, I can remove columns using my Power Query. Remove columns, remove other columns. Take a look at this. If I want to remove this column, I will highlight it. Then I will come here, I will click remove column. The column has been removed. Let's say I want to remove a row. I will highlight the row. Then I will come to remove rows. I will click, do I want to remove top n rows from this table? Remove bottom rows, remove all turning rows, remove duplicates, remove blank rows, remove errors. Let me click remove bottom rows. How many number of rows do I want to remove from the bottom? 5 rows upward. Okay, it has removed 5 rows upward. Now, I want to call your attention to this window. I want to call your attention to this window, applied steps window. Every step I'm taking will be recorded in this window. So far, I've changed type of my data, I've removed columns, I've removed bottom rows from my data, and all has been captured. So if I want to go back to the original data, I will double click this to go back to the original data. If I want to go back to the data after I've removed the column, I will click this. If I want to go back to my data after I've removed the bottom rows, I will click this. So let me go back to what the original data. So what else can I do? I can still what split. I can still split column into 2 from my data. Now, split column is useful when you have, for instance, like when you have the name of your customer, the first name and the surname in the same cell, and you want to split them into different column. You can use split column. Now, you have to specify how you want to split the column. Do you want to split the column by delimiter? Perhaps you want to use comma or a full stop to split the data. Do you want to split the data by specifying the number of characters? Do you want to split the data into fragments based on a specified position? Do you want to split the data using lowercase or uppercase as a yardstick? Do you want to split data by digits to non-digits, etc.? So in this data set example, there is actually no data that can be split, so I can ignore that. I will use another data set to explain that. Also, another thing you can do is you can merge queries. We've not actually used query in this data set. If you've used queries in one column or another column, you can still merge your queries. In this, you can merge your queries to generate a new column, or you merge your queries in a new Excel sheet using this feature. Now let's go to the transforms section. In the transform section, you can transpose your rows. You can carry out transpose function. Transpose function will convert rows to column and column to rows. If you want to reverse your rows, let's see. The rows we have make, model, color, mileage, price, cost. Let me click transpose. Transpose. Insert. You can see transpose has converted the rows to column and the columns to row. So let me go back to the source. Now, I can also reverse rows. So you can see if I reverse rows, the last data will come to the beginning, the first data will come to the end of the data set. So let me go back to the original data. What else can I do? I can count the number of rows in a column. I've selected this make column, count rows, insert. It's telling me that I have what 698 rows in my column. So let me go back to the original. Let me count this number of rows, transform, count rows, insert. It's telling me I have 698 rows in that column as well. Now, what you can use this to do is to confirm if all your rows contains data. if all your rows contain data. Now this data set has what? 698 rows. And I'll be able to confirm that all the data contains data by counting the number of rows that contains data. Okay, what else can I do from the transform window? Okay, I can rename a cell, I can replace values, under, okay, insert. Let's say I want to replace under with data. Okay, so you discover that in this row, all instances of under has been replaced with data. So let me go back to the source. You can see I have my original data set. What else can we do? Okay, what else can we do? Format. If I want to change a text to lowercase or uppercase, I can do that under this format button. Okay, let me change all the text in the make colon to uppercase. Insert. You can see that all the text has been changed to uppercase. These two, let me change it to uppercase. It has been changed to uppercase. Okay. It has been changed to uppercase. Okay, let me change this to uppercase as well. It has been changed to uppercase. Now, another data formatting option is string, but I will illustrate this when I get to how to carry out data formatting. So after I've claimed my data using Power Query, I can now go to the home window, then I'll click close and load. Close means close Power Query editor. And the load aspect means load the claimed data into my Excel sheet. So let me close and load. If I don't want to load it into the Excel sheet, I can come here to close my data, my Power Query editor. So let me click close and load. Now, take a look at what happened. Okay. An error has been noticed. Let me go back to it again. Data from table. Okay, close and load. Okay, now the data has been loaded into my Excel sheet. Now, what you should notice is that it has not overwritten the original data set, but a new sheet was created for the data set. So this is how to use Power Query Editor to clean our data set. So number one, the first method of activating a Power Query Editor, if you have already opened your data, in the data menu, locate the get and transform group, click from table command, press OK. If a window pop-ups, then the Power Query Editor will pop up. Now, what's the second method? If I've already opened your data, in the tell me what to do menu, you can click enter power. You can enter power, then it will pop up. Now let me take this Excel version has tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. So I can click. I want to launch Power Query Editor, but I don't know where it is. Power. Immediately I click power, I can see, let me try again. I click here, P-O, power, see, launch Power Query Editor. Then I'll click launch Power Query Editor. So I can use tell me what to do feature to also launch my Power Query Editor. Then I'll click the cell, the table that contains the data set. So my data set has been loaded. Now I don't want to clean this. I'll close this Power Query window. So I've also illustrated that here. Identifying the tell me what to do feature. As you press power, you see launch Power Query Editor, then you launch it. So what's the third method of activating a Power Query Editor? While loading your data from any source, the Power Query Editor also can automatically pop up. Let me illustrate that. Okay, this is a new sheet. I've created a new sheet. I want to load the data. I want to load the data that is in, I want to load the data from Access database. So what will I do? I'll go to data, then I'll click a new query from database, then I'll click from Microsoft Access database. You can activate your Power Query Editor by at the point of loading your data. into Excel. How will you do that? You go to data, from database. I want to load a data from access database. So I'll click from access database. So let me try and locate a data set for data analysis, MS Access. Now, this is my data, import. So immediately I click import, my Power Query editor will pop up. I can double click the table that contains the data, then here is my Power Query editor. So those are the three ways of loading our data or cleaning our data using Power Query editor. We demonstrated how we can use Excel Power Query editor to clean our data. Now, in addition to using Power Query editor to clean our data, we can still clean our data by using some inbuilt Excel functions. There are some inbuilt Excel functions that we can use to clean our data. Anytime we want to clean our data as a data analyst, these are the steps I would recommend for us to take sequentially. Number one, conduct a spell checking of your entire data set. Now, when you conduct a spell checking of your entire data set, some grammatical errors in your data set can be highlighted, and suggestions towards correcting those grammatical errors can be thrown at you. So you can agree with some of those suggestions, and you can ignore some of those suggestions. Now, suggestions that you don't agree to or that cannot be corrected using spell checking, you can still use the find and replace feature to correct those misspelled values. So after you've corrected the misspelled values, you can now go ahead to remove your empty rows. After you've removed your empty rows, you can now go ahead to remove duplicated rows of data. I will always advise that anytime you want to clean your data, you should carry out these steps sequentially. Carry out spell checking, correct misspelled values, remove empty rows, then remove duplicated rows of data. Now, this is my data set. The first data cleaning step I advise us to do is to carry out spell checking. So if I want to carry out spell checking, what will I do? I will go to the review menu. Then I will click this spell checking command. I will click this spell checking command. Now, this is the review menu, spell checking. It will identify different errors. For instance, it's telling me that it has identified in cell D11, it has identified WHTE, and it has given me different suggestions that perhaps it is wet that ought to be there or white. I know it's white that's supposed to be there, so I will select white, then I will click change all. Do you want to continue from the beginning of the screen sheet? Yes. So it will change all. It has also identified color to be grammatically wrong. I can decide to change it to this format, color. So now that's spell checking. I can still go to another column, carry out spell checking in this column. Yes, you are good to go. Carry out spell checking in this column. Yes, spell checking has been completed. Now, I'll discover that there are some names that were not captured. For instance, this accord is supposed to be ACCORD. It wasn't identified as a grammatical error. Take a look at this Nizan. Nizan is supposed to be NISSAN. It wasn't identified as a grammatical error. So I can use find and replace feature to replace these missing values. So if I want to use find and replace feature, how will I do it? I'll press Ctrl F. Now find Nizan. Okay, let me use replace. Find Nizan. Every instances of Nizan, replace it with what? The correct value for Nizan. Find all, replace all. So imagine 42 replacements have been made. Now, what next? I want to change accord. Accord is not ACCORD. Accord supposed to be ACCORD. Replace all. We couldn't find anything. Okay, in that row, accord was not found. Okay, let me go to the next row. Ctrl F. replace all. So couldn't find anything. Now let me highlight the old Control F, replace accord. Oh, take a minute. I made a mistake in my spelling of the accord. It's supposed to be ACOR, ACOR. Yeah. Replace all done. We have made 2 replacements. So with this, I've been able to, okay, let me go here. Let me go to this column and carry out spell checking. Yes. Spell checking complete, you are good to go. But I know this green is supposed to be green color. And I expect spell checking to also identify that. Okay, spell checking could not identify it. I can use find and replace to fix that. Find what? GREN. Replace with what? GREEN. So imagine 21 replacements have been made. So now I've used spell checking to clean my data, and I've also used find and replace to replace misspelled value. So what's the third data cleaning task I must do? The third data cleaning task I must do is to remove empty rows. Let me check, are there empty rows in this cell, in this data set? You can see this is in row 37, that's an empty row. In row 85, that's 87, that's an empty row. Row 104, that's an empty row. Row 188, that's an empty row. Now, empty row is an unwanted feature in our data sets. It will always lead to inconsistencies or inaccuracies. For instance, if I want to convert this data to a table, Control T. Now, you will discover that it's only identified data between cell B1 to G36, and of which my data set goes beyond G36. In fact, my data set is up to what? My data set spans to cell G699. So the presence of empty rows has divided my data set into different sections. So that means any formula, any analysis I want to do is to see my data as having different sections, and the analysis will be done on different sections or the active section in my cell, and that is not a wanted task. So the best way to do this will now be to highlight all my data sets, and convert it to table by pressing Ctrl T. Now it's telling me that my data set ranges from cell B1 to cell G99. I will click OK. So now I want to identify empty rows. What will I do? How will I identify empty rows? After I've converted my data to table, to tabular formats, I will pick any column and check if there are empty rows in the column. Let me start from price. I will go to the filter section. Okay, take a look at this. It's telling me that in column F, these are the various values I have in column F. So that means there is at least one instance of this data in column F, one instance of this data in column F. So, and it's still telling me that this is telling me that there is also a blank row in my data set. So how will I remove that? I will uncheck this select all, then I will check this blank section to view only the blank rows. So now I've been able to view only the blank row. So I'll press Ctrl A to highlight the blank rows, and I will go to Home. Then I'll go to the cell group, select delete, then I'll select delete table rows. Delete table rows or delete sheet rows. So I'll select delete table rows. So after I've selected delete table rows, it has deleted all the empty rows in my data. Then I will come back to this price column select the feature, the filter bar on the price column. These are the values. Select all, click OK. Then I have a data without empty rows. So now on my data set, I've carried out spell checking to remove grammatical errors. I've used find and replace to remove some misspelled values. And now I've also removed empty rows. So the next thing I need to do to clean my data is to remove duplicate values. So how will I remove duplicate values from my data set? To remove duplicate values, I will go to Home. I will go to Home. So to remove duplicate values in my data set, I will go to Data, then I will identify the Data Tools group, then I will click this command, remove duplicate values. You can see it saying delete duplicate rows from a sheet, not duplicate values. I want to use this feature to remove duplicate rows, not duplicate values. I want to use this sheet to remove duplicate rows from the Excel sheet. So from data, I'll go to data tools, then I'll click this remove duplicates command to remove duplicate values from my data sheet. When I click it, it will highlight all the data sets in my Excel sheet. Then I'll click OK. Imagine 678 duplicate values were found and removed. So that means the actual data set that has like uh, 699 rows contains 678 duplicate values. Now imagine if I use a data set that contains 678 duplicate values for my data analysis. That means at the end of the day, I will have a faulty result. So this data set only contains 15 unique values. 15 unique values. So these are the steps I need to take in order to clean my data. So now let me use another data set as a case study. So in this data set, let me use this data set as a case study. In this data set, what's the first thing I will do? I will highlight all the data sets. I will highlight all the data sets, convert it to table by pressing Ctrl T. Yes, okay. Now, what's the first thing I want to do? I want to spell check. View. I want to check grammatical errors. Now it's telling me that player name should not have an hyphen. Ignore. Now, right foot should not have an hyphen. Ignore. So spell checking will scan through all my data sets and identify different grammatical errors in my data set. It will call my attention to different grammatical errors in my data set. But at the end of the day, it will give me some suggestions on how those errors can be corrected, but I'll be the one to decide or agree with those suggestions thrown at me. Match played, ignore. Now Benzema. Benzema supposed to be this. Okay, I agree. Change all instances. Nkunku supposed to be this. Oh, I disagree. Ignore. Ronaldo supposed to be this. I agree. Change all. Mbappe. This is supposed to be Mbappe. So I will ignore this. Then I will notice that, okay, I cannot use spell checking to remove Mbappe, but I will come back to use find and replace to correct Mbappe, because in the suggestions there is no correct value for Mbappe there. So I will ignore. Who is this? This will be uh Naves. This is Naves. So I'll use spell checking to correct this. Ignore once. Sana. This will be Sane. I'll use find and replace to correct that. This should be Mane. I will use find and replace to ignore that. This should be Rodrigo. Is this not correct? This seems to be correct. Change all. Vanneking. Let's assume this is correct. Change all. Gonad verbs. If this is correct, I will ignore. If it's not correct, I will accept. Ignore once. This should be Vinicius. Okay. Change all. Junior. Change all. Diaz. This should be Diaz. Yeah. This is the correct one. Change all. This should be Atletico. Change all. Barak. Let's assume this is correct. Yimas. Let's assume this is correct. This should be Andre. Let's assume it's Andras. Change all. Malen. Let's assume this is correct. Ignore all. Haaland. I think this is correct. Change all. Rakitic. This should be Rakitic. Change all. I don't know what this is. Pulios. Let me assume this is Pulios. I will note it. I'll use find and replace to remove it. Ignore all. Shakhtar Donetsk. This is correct. Ignore all. This should be the correct one. Change all. Cancelo. This is correct. Ignore all. So this is how I'll carry out. This is how I will use spell checking to correct all the grammatical errors that were thrown at me. So now I'm done with spell checking, but there are some errors that spell checking could not capture, like in Mbappe. I'll now use find and replace to replace those misspelled feature. How will I use find and replace? I'll press Ctrl F, replace Mbappe. Find what? Mbappe. Oh no, what's it? Okay, in this format, find this. Yeah, replace with this. Mbappe. Replace all. One replacement was made. I also noted Sane. Okay, find this. Replace with what? Sane. Replace all. Two replacements were made. Mane. Okay, this. Replace with what? Mane. Replace all. One replacement. So I believe I've replaced all misspelled values. So what's the third data cleaning step I will do to remove empty rows? Like this is an empty row, 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 this is an empty row. So what will I do to remove the empty row? Let me use this colon to identify the empty row. Now when I click the filter button, I will uncheck select all, then I will click this blanks to show the blanks. Imagine this number of blank cells in my Excel sheet. So I'll press Ctrl A, then I will go to home, I'll go to cells group, delete table rows, delete table rows. So the empty rows have been deleted. So now I'll go back to this column I use for the filtering goals. You can see the values. I'll select all, then I'll click OK. Now I've removed empty rows from my data set. So what's the last data cleaning exercise I need to do? That is what? Removing duplicated rows. So how will I remove duplicated rows? I will go to data. I will make sure at least a cell in the data set is highlighted. Then I'll go to data, then I'll click remove duplicates. It will highlight all the data sets, then I'll click OK. Now imagine 18 duplicate values were found and removed, and my data set remains 186 unique values. So I'll click OK. So now I believe this data has been cleaned. Now take a look at this. This data has been cleaned, but the data has not been well formatted. So that's the reason why our data cleaning exercise should also be complemented with data formatting. For instance, Ronaldo has not been well formatted. The data here has not been well formatted. The data here has not been well formatted. This data has not been well formatted. So how will I correct that? I will have to use trim to correct that. I will have to trim to correct that. Now, I can use trim feature in my Power Query to correct that. Now, let me go to launch my Power Query. I'll go to data, new query. I'll go to data from table. It will launch my Power Query editor. Okay, I want to trim this. The row has been highlighted. Let me identify where trim is. Transform, format, trim. Now, you can see, take a look at the old data sets. Take a look at the trimmed data sets. Now, I've formatted my data. Then I can now go to what? Home. Then I'll select close and load. Close and load to close the Power Query editor and to load the corrected data into my data set. So you now see that the corrected data, the clean data was loaded in a new sheet. The clean data was loaded in a new sheet. So I can rename this and give it a new name, cleaned data, cleaned data. In addition to our data cleaning tasks, we still need to format our data. Data cleaning and data formatting will give us a perfect data for analysis. Now, what does data formatting involve? Data formatting involves sorting. You can decide to sort our data in a particular order, perhaps alphabetical or in increasing or decreasing order. We can also decide to trim our data. We can decide to pass our data from text to colon. We can also decide to change the case of our data. We can also decide to carry out what we call text wrapping. We can also decide to merge cells. We can also decide to what format cell contents. These are activities we can carry out during the data formatting steps in our data sets. So now let me illustrate how we can do all this. Now, data sorting. Let's assume that I want to sort this data in alphabetical order. I'll go here, sort A to Z. It has sorted this alphabetically. Okay, that's data sorting. Now, data trimming. Let me use another data set for data trimming. Okay, let me use this for data trimming. Now, the best platform to use that will involve using formulas is to use data query win editor. So I'll go to data, select from data table. Yes, I want to trim this. I'll go to transform. I'll go to format. I'll go to trim. Now I'll trim the data. Then I'll go to what? Home, close and load. So this data has been what? Trimmed. Okay, data passing from text to column. Let me look for a data set to use for that. Okay, let's say here, this is the customer name. The data in this customer name, we have the name. In this customer name, we have both first name and surname. So I want to separate that. So I'll go to this. I'll go to formulas. No, I'll go to data, text to column. Now, before I carry out text to column, I must ensure that using exec functions, I must ensure that there are two columns. The columns where those data will be placed are empty. So let me create 3 empty columns before I carry out my data column splitting. So now, delimited, click next. What do I want to use? I want to use a space. Okay, it has given me an overview of how the results will be next. So there will be a colon, a data here, there will be a data in this other column, then I'll click finish. So now I have this and this here, so I can delete all this. I can delete all this. Delete. So that's how to carry out data passing from text to colon. Changing case. Okay, we have a case to change. Let me look for a data to illustrate that. Okay, this data set, let's assume that this data set, let me insert an empty row. I want to change the case. There are formulas I can use to change the case. I'll type this. Okay, the formula is, let me say proper. Let me say proper. Proper. I'll double click this. What's the test? This test. Close the bracket, press enter. So you can see I'll change the case. Each name starts with a capital letter, then I can use fill command to effect this. So now I can delete this. Take a look at what's happened. Because the results here was making reference to the results in the previous column that I deleted. So it has generated error. So I'll press Ctrl Z. So the best thing for me to do is to copy this, paste it there, then I will select paste as values. So it has pasted it as values, then I can now delete this and delete other column. So now that has to change cables. Now let's say I want to merge cells. I want to add header. I want to add header to these data sets. Insert. Okay, I want the header to be here. Then I'll go to home. I'll select merge and center. What's the name of the data set? Let me say customer sales data. Customer sales data. Okay. Now, data formatting also involves changing the font type, meandra, then changing the font type, changing the font size, changing the font color. Now, changing the background, font background color. Yeah. So I've used merge and center to do that. So these are the things I can do. These are the things I can do. Okay, insert. Let me add an header to this. Insert. Insert. Okay. Merge center. This is what 2022 Champions League starts. Okay, increase. Let me increase okay, let me use this. Yeah, increase the font size. Add this color, give it this background. Give it this background. Yeah, so those are the things I can use formatting cell contents. So all these things I've illustrated are what data formatting activities that can make our data perfect and suitable for analysis. Thank you. Next lecture will be how we can carry out conditional formatting in Excel. How we can carry out conditional formatting in Excel. So I'll advise you to stay tuned. I'll send the link to everyone, and you can also subscribe so that even if I forget to send the link, once it's uploaded, you'll receive a message. Thank you.